Cinemajaw is sponsored by Overcast, an independent podcast app that embraces the open world of podcasting instead of locking it down. No exclusives, no premium content, no paywalls. Just a great podcast app for everyone. Get it for free in the App Store.
And we thank them for their support. You're listening to Cinemajaw, the greatest movies podcast ever, recorded on location from our respective homes in Chicago. My name is Matt Kay, and with me is...
Rye the Movie Guy. And this week on Cinemajaw, Matt, I'd like to ask you a question.
Okay.
Will you do the honor of going out with me and covering our top 5 favorite movie dates?
Oh, man. Yes, I've had far too many man dates with you, Ryan. Far too many.
I thought that was nice. A nice way to start the show, asking Matt out on a date.
It's always really nice, Jawheads, when we get to a movie screening, Ryan comes in after me, which is not usually the case, I'll be honest. I'm usually the one who's running late. Ryan divvies, which is the bicycle share program here in Chicago. So he'll ride a bicycle from his house, and he gets to the theater, and he's sweaty, and he sits down next to me, and I'm like, oh, geez.
Yeah, and you got a cold beer already going.
Yeah, well, of course, man.
Oh, how I miss those screenings.
I miss them too, brother. I really, really do. Can't wait to get back to those.
Yep. We're covering our top 5 favorite movie dates. These are not date movies. Want to be clear here. These are dates that the characters go on in the movies.
That's right. We did actually cover date movies way back in the day. I believe episode 84. We can throw that in an early jaw box to make sure.
Throw that in.
The guest was Anna Furnett, who wrote an article, like a column in the local tabloid, The Red Eye, which is a Tribune paper, called Accidentally Sexy, which was like general dating advice and stuff like that. That was a fun episode, in our early days. This is different, Ryan. These are the date scenes from the movies, your favorite moments of romance or bromance, right? This could be
Correct.
Any sort of couple going out for a fun evening.
Correct. I was watching a lot of clips getting ready for this episode, and it's funny because so many of the times during these scenes, these are the moments that we sort of fall in love and start to root for the characters in many of these kind of romantic comedies. They're memorable scenes because of that. It's like, yes, that's the moment I fell in love with this actress or this actor. I know people are sitting in the theaters, and this is a moment that they said, wow, I love this person, on screen. You have that connection.
Right. And it's also very relatable. Most people have run the gamut of dating and had the good experiences, the bad, the falling in love, the horrible first dates. It's something we can all watch and appreciate as a shared experience.
Yes. And we're doing our top 5 favorite movie dates because it ties into one of the reviews we have this week, Matt.
That's right. That one would be The Wrong Missy, the new one from Happy Madison Productions, Adam Sandler's company. We're also reviewing this week a new film starring Elijah Wood called Come to Daddy. Not exactly a movie date in that, or is it a date movie? But nonetheless, we're reviewing both.
I don't think we've actually reviewed a Happy Madison production on Cinemajaw in the history of Cinemajaw.
Is that a fact? Have we not?
Almost positive. We've obviously reviewed Adam Sandler movies, but not a Happy Madison production, which is, like you said, his production company. And usually that is a style of film, which is the silly screwball comedy that...
Right. Rob Schneider's bound to pop up.
Right.
Yeah.
Those kind of movies.
Yeah. Speaking of Cinemajaw first, Ryan, this is the very first time I have ever podcasted in pajamas.
Wow. That is nice to know. I'm glad that the Zoom camera I'm looking at you is shoulders and up.
Yeah. Well, I am wearing pants. They're just very comfortable.
We have no guests, so we will be playing Stump the Kubinski. It's also our last week to celebrate the great Steve Carell. It's been a wonderful month of May celebrating this man. So let's start there with a Steve Carell fact.
All right, Ryan. The sequel to Bruce Almighty, Evan Almighty, starring Steve Carell, has a fun Easter egg to look for. While Evan is driving, he passes a movie theater. The movie playing is The 40-Year-Old Virgin Mary, an obvious reference to the 40-Year-Old Virgin.
I don't think I've seen Evan Almighty, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I did. This was like a rental at my parents' house, which is the only reason I think anybody would watch this movie. It's a shame. I think Bruce Almighty was actually a really good movie. And I was pretty stoked for Evan Almighty because I'm a fan of Carell. And it just completely misses the mark. You know, it captures none of that fun spirit from the first movie. And it goes a little too deep into the religion aspect of it, which was, I don't know, maybe some people would like that, but it was a little too wholesome and religious for me.
Maybe I'd catch it somewhere down the road, but slim chance of
Yeah, you can miss it. There's a whole Noah's Ark thing going on with it. And Carell's got some funny moments, but it's missable. I hate to say it.
Since we don't have a guest and we normally do the interview here, we should note we're recording this just about an hour or so after the new trailer for Christopher Nolan's latest film, Tenet, dropped. Did you watch this, Matt?
Not only did I watch it, Ryan, I watched it live in game on a little video game called Fortnite. I was there with my sons. We had two TVs going, one on the PlayStation 4 and one on the Nintendo Switch. And we watched the Tenet trailer together. It was completely lost on my 6-year-old son. But Parker, my 12-year-old, was like, wow, this looks cool. He was actually kind of interested. But what was more interesting than the trailer, although the trailer was awesome and we need to talk about it, was just the experience of how it went down. It started out with, so this guy from the production company is interviewing John David Washington, and they're like two talking heads. So this is Fortnite, right? So it's a third person perspective shooter, right? So my character walks up to the screen and I have this one emote that's like a chair. So you sit down like you're in a chair and the screen kind of comes on and gets bigger in your field of view, and you watch this interview and they start talking about gaming, and it was kind of awkward, to be honest. People were throwing tomatoes at the screen. And then the which is a thing you can do in the game, Ryan.
Okay.
Then the trailer,
okay.
Yeah, the trailer plays. And again, one of the things this interviewer said was, it's really great that we can be together and watch this together, even if it is in a virtual space. And I couldn't agree more. That was kind of the most amazing thing, was there were all these people around me who represent, a total of millions that were watching this live in Fortnite. And it was really cool. The trailer came, played. Then when it ended, there was a bit more of a follow-up interview. And then we went about our day and went and played a shoot 'em up video game. And it's so Ready Player One, dude. And by the way, people, read the book. The movie was great, but read the book, because that's what Fortnite is. That's what this experience felt like. It was very Ready Player One. Like
you were actually in a virtual experience, not just playing a video game, but actually experiencing life in a virtual world.
Yeah, it was a little different when J.J. Abrams did it. He actually was an avatar in the game. Mm-hmm. This was just two talking heads on a screen in the game. So it was a little, the production value was a little lower than a Star Wars movie. Kind of makes sense, but it was still pretty cool, man. It was just a unique experience that speaks to the times that we're in right now and speaks to the future of how we are going to get together in virtual spaces, which I find fascinating.
Obviously was following along on Twitter. I thought that the Tenet marketing team did a great job, because I don't watch a ton of television, but I happened to be watching, I think it was Jimmy Kimmel last night. And during his show, there was a commercial for the Tenet trailer. So now we actually have a commercial that says new trailer tomorrow.
Well, commercial for a commercial.
Correct, right? So that's already bizarre. But middle of the day today, while I was doing work, I pulled up Twitter to see, let's see what everybody's saying about the Tenet trailer, figuring it probably dropped in the morning or who knows what. And the main account for the movie was saying trailer 1 hour, but then nothing. And then about 5 hours later, it said trailer 1 hour, because clearly the movie has something to do with time, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I think they were having fun with this whole idea of saying that it already came out. It came out. Where is it? Everybody's wondering where it is. And it's saying 1 hour and people are waiting. I think they were having fun with this whole time idea that the movie plays with as well.
Well, it finally dawned on me that the word tenant is a palindrome while I was watching this trailer. I did not pick up on that earlier when we saw like the teaser and stuff. There's a scene in the trailer, which I'm sure every jawhead has seen at this point, where he's shooting a gun and the person who's with him says, "You're not firing the bullets, you're catching the bullets." So the bullets are actually coming out of the target and into his pistol.
God.
So cool. What's really weird, man, in a bizarre turn of events, did you see the news? This has nothing to do with films, but it does have something to do with this film, that NASA discovered a parallel universe where time travels backwards.
Sure.
They've got to be like just giddy with this news. I mean, you can't make that stuff up.
I agree with you. I thought so much so. I thought, like, this has got to be a joke. Like, I think this probably happened, and Christopher Nolan somehow said, sit on this news until the trailer is about to come out, because it's ridiculous that came out and now this movie is coming out. It seems very bizarre.
Very bizarre. But the best, to wrap this up, let's put a bow on it. The best part of the trailer was right at the very end when it said in theaters this July. I just want to make a quick comment so everyone understands that I want it to be only if it is completely safe for people to go to theaters and they are happy enough. They're in safe places where they can get to theaters. I guess that's the right way to say it. But it's still, wow, the only tent pole that we know for sure is hanging on. Yeah. And I did love it too. I sent out a tweet. That was my favorite part. It had this beat that the music was going with, and then it went with the words coming to theaters. It was perfect. I think people are excited to get to see a blockbuster like this on the big screen at some point here. So I'm hoping, man, that this will be something that we can all enjoy as a film watching community. I really hope. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed,
Matt. Let's move on to another big blockbuster, Matt K. I have to ask you this question. Are you familiar with the Super Mario Brothers games on Nintendo?
Of course.
It has grown to a whole cast of characters. Not just Mario. You have Donkey Kong, Yoshi, and a slew of others. Many of them get their own game these days. I bring this up because it reminds me of Adam Sandler and his cast of characters around him. His Happy Madison Productions produce many silly comedies. A big one, a Mario game if you will, stars Adam Sandler himself. Rob Schneider is like a Yoshi game, or maybe worse, Kirby. Well, David Spade would be like Luigi getting his own game. And that's what we have here, The Wrong Missy. Is it worth playing? I mean, is it worth seeing? Or is this the wrong movie? Matt and I sat down to check it out.
I've got this girl meeting me here, and she's amazing. Missy, what are you doing here?
That text from you was wonderful.
I screwed up so huge. Remember that crazy blind date I had?
Nothing you could ever do would disappoint me. I love you.
This whole time I thought I was texting my dream girl. I was texting that crazy girl.
To the best weekend ever. Oh my God.
The premise for The Wrong Missy is pretty darn funny. David Spade's character, Tim, goes on a horrible blind date with a girl named Melissa, or Missy, played by Lauren Lapkus. Later, he meets another woman named Missy, who he has a little time with in an airport. She is extremely pretty, and they hit it off. Tim has a work retreat in which he can bring a date, so he works up the courage to invite Melissa, who he met in the airport. But he accidentally texts the invite to the wrong Missy. Now he has this obnoxious goofball as his date for the entire trip. Spade plays the straight man here. The comedy comes from Lauren Lapkus, and I have to say, she is extremely talented, and for the most part, pulled it off. This is not a smart or clever comedy. It is silly, crude, dumb, ridiculous. That said, I found myself laughing at it more than a few times. Matt, was The Wrong Missy right for you?
First, I love the Super Mario comparison there. I would say Toad instead of Kirby. You can tell we've been playing way too many video games recently. Second, what needs to be addressed right here at the top is that it has not gone unnoticed that nearly all of the Happy Madison movies are on location shoots. Basically, Sandler and co. have figured out a way to take themselves and new buddies on an all-expense-paid vacation and even make a little money in the process. This may be the most genius lifestyle hack ever, but usually the movies are second rate. I would say, however, The Wrong Missy is more like first and a half rate. Spade is at his most likable in this film as Tim, the boring sales team leader who doesn't drink and is unlucky in love. Lovable loser is not much of a stretch for Spade, but he plays it adequately enough. Lauren Lapkus, I agree, Rye, is the meat of this picture as the titular Wrong Missy. She's just able to thread the needle between attractive and repulsive, carefree and out of control, lovable and hated. I bought every second of it. The more sincere beats actually rang somewhat true because of their performances together, or at least true enough to get this rom-com just over the finish line for me. This is as milquetoast as it gets, but sometimes I guess that's comforting. The Wrong Missy is not terribly creative, but it made me chuckle. It's one of the better recent Happy Madisons, worth a spin. Rye, did you find this movie to be boiled or blanched?
I think we're going to pretty much agree here. I found it to be quite enjoyable and shockingly, because I didn't think going into the movie I would even maybe watch this. I wasn't sure what we were going to review this week. There wasn't a ton out there. And I'll be honest, I was telling you before I hit record here, I was having a few beers on Friday when I decided even to start the movie. I was already 4 or 5 beers in.
Thinking clearly is what you were going to say, yeah.
And I remember thinking I was sitting out on my deck enjoying, we finally had some nice weather, like typical Chicago weather. All of a sudden, like a cool breeze came in and it started to get a little chilly out. I was like, all right, I'll go inside. And then I thought, well, maybe I should crack another beer open and go watch that Wrong Missy. And I think that the state of mind I was in, having a little fun, being a Friday, under the influence, helped. Now, I laughed a lot. I wrote down, I laughed way more at this movie than I probably should have. But hey, I was having fun. It was a Friday and I was enjoying it. Yeah, there's nothing here that's clever or that we got to like break down that's sophisticated movie making. It's a Happy Madison. It's David Spade. The highlight here for sure is Lauren Lapkus.
Yeah. She's the best. Although, like I said, I really liked Spade in this as well. I kind of said milquetoast, and it's a bit of a dig, but it sums up this movie quite well. This is very plain Jane, middle of the road, but of the plain Jane, middle of the roads, a fairly good one. So
and this is a good movie for Netflix. You know, we talk about like if I went out to the theater and I picked up a date and we went and paid at a movie theater to see this movie, I'd be trashing all over it by the time I came out of the movie theater. But the idea that I walked in off my deck, a few beers in, cracked another beer and just hit play on a remote control completely changes the expectations you have for the movie. Now all of a sudden it has a very small hurdle to jump over for me to already say, hey, this wasn't bad, you know?
Yeah, I think you're right. What do you think about my assertion that this is a lifestyle hack that Sandler's figured out?
I do. You are right that he does go down somewhere on vacation with all of these movies. It is pretty brilliant, right?
Yeah.
There's a shark scene in this movie I laughed quite a bit at, and that's when Rob Schneider appears. The whole entire scene is pretty funny, and I had wrote down the shark scene is the funniest since the end of 47 Meters Down Uncaged. And that's a rip at 47 Meters Down Uncaged, which was supposed to be a serious shark movie. But again, there were a couple of scenes in this Wrong Missy that actually got me to laugh out loud.
Yeah, the cliff diving scene was pretty funny too.
That's great. Again, that definitely was a good chuckle for sure.
Yeah, this is a great movie if you're in the mood for just a mindless chuckle that, like you said, Ryan, it's not terribly clever, but highly decent.
You got a movie poster quote for me?
I might be wrong. This is no hit, but it's not a Missy.
If that was on a poster, people would be reading that and trying to figure it out, you know, like, that's way too clever for this movie, Matt.
You see what I did there? Yeah.
Way too clever for this movie.
What do you got?
I got a 2 for here. One thing right with the Wrong Missy is Lauren Lapkus. That one's my serious one. My silly one is 5 beers deep. You're going to love this movie.
Yeah. Both very accurate. How many jaws you given this one?
2 jaws. 2 jaws.
Rarely give the quarter jaw, but I'm giving this 2.25 jaws. 2 1/4. It's just a little bit better than middle of the road. Just a little bit.
Jawheads, if you've seen The Wrong Missy, agree, disagree, just want to chime in on a comment, write us feedback@cinemajaw.com. Of course, it was that movie and this really long date that David Spade has to go on because he's on a retreat with The Wrong Missy that got us thinking of our favorite movie dates. Again, these are scenes, actual dates that the characters go on. Matt, this was a blast coming up with this list. I had more fun coming up with this list than I've had in a long time.
These are fun beats. Not all of my dates are good dates or romantic dates. Some of them are quite disastrous, but we'll get to each in turn. Number 5, I'm starting out with a date that just right from the get-go you love so much, because Jack tells Miles not to drink too much. Don't go to the dark side. We don't want anybody going to the dark side. And Miles agrees. And then he says, and if they want to drink Merlot, we're drinking Merlot. But that's where he draws the line. No, I am not drinking any fucking Merlot.
No, if anybody orders Merlot, I'm leaving. I am not drinking any fucking Merlot.
I mean, I rewound that scene from Sideways probably 500 times just to watch him say, I'm not drinking any fucking Merlot. The subsequent date scene is funny. It's tragic. It's extremely well acted. You got Thomas Hayden Church. You have Paul Giamatti.
Sandra Oh and Virginia Madsen.
The foursome has a acting chemistry, and obviously it's a date, so they're supposed to have some chemistry there. But the acting chemistry just clicked. The four of them together, it's just a brilliant scene from a great movie.
It is. And in fact, the reason I was so shocked that you brought this up, it was my number 5 as well.
Oh, no way.
That's why I was able to whip off those actresses' names right away, because they're in my notes right in front of me here. I also had that 2 iconic moments really in movies. One is the effing Merlot comment. It's absolutely awesome. And the second one is after they've had dinner, they go back to Maya's place, who is played by Virginia Madsen. This is when her and Miles have this very serious talk. He asks her what she loves about wine, and she goes in to give this most beautifully poetic monologue. Just listen to her here talk about wine.
I like to think about the life of wine.
Yeah.
How it's a living thing. I like to think about what was going on the year the grapes were growing. How the sun was shining. If it rained. I like to think about all the people who tended and picked the grapes. And if it's an old wine, how many of them must be dead by now? I like how wine continues to evolve. Like if I opened a bottle of wine today, it would taste different than if I'd opened it on any other day. Because a bottle of wine is actually alive. And it's constantly evolving and gaining complexity. That is until it peaks. Like you're 61. And then it begins its steady, inevitable decline. And it tastes so fucking good.
He has nothing. He can't follow that up with anything. He's just completely taken by her at that point, and her love of wine. I love that entire movie and that scene in particular.
It's easy to relate to because there's something we all get a little poetic about, right? Something that we're attached to, that when you find somebody who shares that same attachment or affinity for, that can be such a magical connection between two people.
Okay, so that was my number 5. I'm just going to throw in a quick substitute.
Go for it.
And I'm going to go with the opening of The Social Network.
Okay.
Just to highlight this one, because this is how really basically the film opens, with Jesse Eisenberg out on a date with Rooney Mara. This is when we get all the backstory, if you will, on Jesse Eisenberg's character of Mark Zuckerberg, about how he wants to get into the clubs and how they're so exclusive, the angst that he has about getting into them. And that plays into a much larger role of him creating Facebook, going forward. And this is a date that goes horribly wrong. Nothing good comes of this. I mean, he absolutely rips into her, and she absolutely can't stand him. And he goes back to the dorms and makes that, what was that site? Hot or Not, or something.
Yeah, some Face Smash or something.
Yeah, something along those, all over this date. But what a great way to open the movie, with a date scene.
That Alan Sorkin dialogue is undeniably amazing. So at number 4, I have a mandate, if you will. Two guys going out, not a romantic date, but a friendship date. Jim Carrey and Matthew Broderick are in this movie called Cable Guy. And the scene I'm talking about in particular is when Carrey's character, who is not really a cable guy, but pretends to be and gets people free cable in order to win new friends, takes Broderick to medieval times. Janine Garofalo pops up as an angry waitress who explains why there's no silverware in medieval times, but then refills their Pepsi. Andy Dick is the head knight. Do you remember this scene, dude?
I have not seen the movie.
You've never seen Cable Guy?
I have never seen Cable Guy. It is a blind spot for me. I'm writing it down in my journal.
It's really weird because it sort of starts out as like your ordinary goofball comedy, and Jim Carrey, you know, kind of what you would expect from him, and Matthew Broderick plays the straight man, the sad sack. But does it ever take some dark turns, man? It's more than the sum of its parts, and I realize I've been saying that often, but this one is it truly is. The Cable Guy adds up to more than you would imagine it to. This scene is just played for laughs. It's early on in their relationship. They go, you know, all the wacky things that happen in medieval times. They wind up actually jousting each other.
I love the joust. I'm going to look up to see if it's streaming somewhere since I want to catch up with this one. I'll throw that in the jaw box myself.
Oh, dude, it's totally worth it.
Nice pick. All right, swings it over to my number 4, and I go a little ways back here. This movie came out 1953.
Wow.
It stars one Audrey Hepburn and one Gregory Peck. I'm speaking of Roman Holiday. This was a film that was given to me as a gift. It was all my friends started to know me being sort of a movie guy and, you know, film lover. One of my buddies on one of my birthdays got like a 10-pack of classic cinema features.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had never seen this movie, but Roman Holiday was in there, and I gave it a spin. Audrey Hepburn would go on to win the Academy Award for this movie. I think it was her first. Yeah, in fact, this was her first like big American movie as like a star, and she plays Princess Anne. So she's a princess. Doesn't say what country she's a princess in, but she's visiting Rome on state duty. And she's just upset by her busy schedule. And so she sneaks out to go see Rome by herself. She had taken like a sleeping pill, you know, in her travels, and it finally kicks in while she's out seeing Rome by herself. And she falls asleep like on a park bench. This guy, Joe, played by Gregory Peck, sees her, wakes her up, and takes her back to his apartment so she can sort of sleep it off. And at this time, he doesn't recognize her as the princess, but he himself is a reporter there to cover the princess's press conference and stay, but she was a no-show at the press conference. And
yeah, that checks out.
Right, you know?
Yeah.
And so he sees in the newspaper that the princess, you know, wasn't there, and he sees the picture and he realizes that this is her. So he convinces the newspaper guy, like, hey, I can get an exclusive with her. And the guy says he'll give him like this large sum of money. And his idea is to ask her out on a date, to which she agrees. And he's going to take her out and see all the sights of Rome. So they go to the Colosseum, the Spanish Steps, all the famous areas of Rome. And he convinces a buddy of his also to take photographs of them. And so the three of them are sort of out. Those two are more or less on a date, and his friend is taking pictures of them like tourists, but his intention is to use this in a news story. Mm-hmm. You could see what happens here is they actually do start to have feelings for each other. Can he actually turn this into a news story, or should it just be their special moment together? It's the entire movie, basically a good chunk of it is this date of going around Rome and those two falling in love, having a day. It's awesome. If you get a chance to see Roman Holiday, highly recommend it.
Funny thing is if that movie came out today, it would be like starring the teen of the week, and it would be very much in the vein of like Princess Diaries, you know?
Right. It wouldn't have the big names like
no, nor would it be winning Oscars. It's like such a trite concept, but I suppose back when it came out, it was not. Mm-hmm. Into our number 3s. This is when I go back in time, Ryan, for one of the most disastrous dates anybody can imagine. But damn it, if Marty McFly didn't have to do it to save the future, to save his very existence in the universe. And of course, I'm talking about the infamous Enchantment Under the Sea dance from Back to the Future. And you could take your pick, but I'm going with the original Back to the Future. He's on a date with his mom. How awkward is that? The whole thing is set up between him and George McFly to make George look like a hero. His dad, right? The person who will be his dad. I mean, God, everybody knows the plot to Back to the Future. I'm not spoiling anything here. He's got to do a time heist in order to get his parents together. Johnny B. Good up on stage, everything that happens in the parking lot with Biff, get your damn hands off her. This whole scene, this whole sequence is just absolute movie magic, and I love it.
Yeah, there's a great moment in there where they're sitting in the car and his date / his mom pulls out a flask of whiskey and starts drinking. And he's like, oh my God, he can't believe that his mom is drinking whiskey like that. It's great, you know?
It is. It's very revealing. I like that.
For my number 3 pick, I go back to 1990 and a film that gives us one of the best long takes in movie history. And really the long take is the reason why I'm highlighting this particular date. And it is between Henry Hill, played by Ray Liotta, and Karen, played by Lorraine Bracco in Goodfellas. Henry Hill goes to Lorraine's house. The first funny thing that happens on the date is he has his shirt sort of unbuttoned, and Lorraine's Jewish, and he has a cross necklace. She opens the door, and then her mom's right behind her, about to come out, and she's like, oh my God, cover that up. I told her, you were half Jewish. Her mom comes out, talks to him, and he right away is super slick, right? And he takes her to the car, and it's that next scene right after that. They pull up to the Copacabana. The song that starts playing is Then He Kissed Me by the Crystals. And the scene is one long take following them as they go in to this club through the kitchen. They don't want to wait in lines, and he more or less just sort of sweeps her off her feet at this moment because he's giving people money. She can't even believe it. He parks his car basically illegally and hands a guy like a $20 bill, and even at that she's like stunned. You just handed that guy a 20, and he's just like, I don't like to wait in line. He guides her into the kitchen. They walk this wonderful shot. Once they get into the club, the table then is called over to them. As soon as they sit down, a bottle of champagne from another table is gifted to them. It is just literally incredible. And she turns to him and she says, what do you do? And he says, I'm in construction. It's awesome. What a moment. I watched it again leading up to this Jaw, and I had chills at the scene because I loved it so much.
I think this might be from the subsequent scene, the scene after this, but when she first sees his gun and she says, that should have been a red flag, or some words to that effect, like I should have gotten out of there right then and there. But what can I say? I thought it was sexy. I really appreciated the honesty in that beat from the character. And I think this movie is Scorsese's best. You know what? I'd go to the Mattresses for Goodfellas being the number 1 on his list. Speaking of amazing crime directors, my number 2 pick comes from Brian De Palma. It is not Scarface. It is actually 1976 Carrie, the original Carrie movie, a story by Stephen King, obviously. Sissy Spacek plays the title character Carrie. The date is the prom. She finally gets up the balls to stand up to her mom, who's kind of a psycho, goes out with a boy to a dance. They're all going to laugh at you, Everything's going great. She gets named homecoming queen, and I guess it's the homecoming dance, not the prom, or is the prom queen, whatever. And she goes up on stage, and of course, PJ Souls and John Travolta dump a bucket of pig blood on her, and then her telekinetic powers come out, and everybody gets trapped in the gym and burned to death. But right up until that moment, everything was just wonderful. She's with the boy of her dreams, having the night of her life.
One I finally caught up with, that was a blind spot for me for a long, long time, and I finally watched a year or two ago.
What'd you think?
Loved it. Good one. Yeah. My number 2 pick is a Tom Cruise movie. Tom Cruise goes on a lot of great dates, especially early on in his career. Now he's more or less action Tom and the guy who just runs across the screen all the time. But you go back some years ago, Tom Cruise could go on a really good date. And I thought one of his best, and I think I have a very fond memory of seeing this at the LaGrange Theater. It's one of those second-run movie theaters. I remember seeing this in an absolutely packed house, and everybody was just enjoying every joke, every beat of this film like you wouldn't believe it. It played incredibly well. I'm speaking of Jerry Maguire, and the date here is Tom Cruise and Renee Zellweger. It's really an unofficial date to start, because they're basically working together. It's this small company. After he had been fired from his job, he starts his own company with Dorothy Boyd.
You consider this a date, though? They're not on a date. They're starting a company.
Yeah, but let me tell you what exactly happens. Again, I rewatched this. So I'm not talking about the time when he comes over there drunk, not that time, then he goes home. It's the next time he comes back after like a business trip. All the women are in the living room having their meeting. And
it's
he comes
support
in
group,
the support group, and he comes in looking for Dorothy. He goes into the kitchen, and she comes in, and she's really dressed in this like beautiful black dress. And he even says, boy, that's more than a dress. It's an Audrey Hepburn movie, which I found ironic watching this because I had already had Roman Holiday on my list. So there's that. And then little Ray, who's the little kid, comes up when they're about to leave and he says, can I have a hug? And he gives Jerry Maguire a hug. They cut to Renee Zellweger and her expression just melts the screen, right? I mean, this is the moment it sounds so funny because I have such a hatred towards Renee Zellweger these days, but we fell in love with her at this point. She just melts the screen and they walk out. And right when the hug happens, Secret Garden by Bruce Springsteen starts playing, which is a very romantic song. He goes outside of the house. Bonnie Hunt catches Renee Zellweger, gives her some advice. She's already crying because she can't believe that her kid just hugged Jerry Maguire like a dad. It's a great scene. And that allows this wonderful moment that we get of Renee Zellweger doing this very cute, like running hop towards Jerry Maguire. And they stand face to face in this just awesome street shot where they're standing across from each other. Cameron Crowe knows what he's doing at this point. They end up going to like a Mexican restaurant and having dinner. They talk about it not being a date, but that is when they come back the first time it gets romantic as well. So it does turn into a date. Jerry does go over there and, extra activity takes place.
He goes inside for some coffee.
Some coffee and I think some cake.
Tea and crumpets.
Yeah, the whole bundle.
Well, that'll happen at the end of a successful date. No doubt. I love Jerry Maguire. I think it's probably one of the most successful romance movies of all time. And it's certainly one of my favorites. And it's also weird because it kind of straddles a bunch of different genres. You could also call this a sports movie. You could call it a buddy movie too, with Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character in there, and certainly a pivotal movie in his career.
Oh, yeah. It's his whole career, right?
No. Don't forget Snow Dogs, right?
Yeah,
how could you forget? Seriously, As Good as It Gets would be another really big movie for Cuba, even though, he's kind of a bit player in that movie. Got to go Gary Sinise there. Anyway, getting way off track. That's a good pick, Ryan. Into our number ones we go. I'm going to get sappy on you, man. I mean, I'm talking John Williams score, sappy on you. In fact, this might be your number one. I could easily see you putting this on your number one. But I'm going to take it way back, sticking in the 70s, 1978, to a movie that when I saw it for the first time, of course, I was waiting for the action beats where, the hero punches the villains. But there's an undeniable romance that sort of, as a young man or child, really, when I saw this for the first time, struck me. And it still strikes me, even though maybe it's a little silly by today's standards. I'm talking about when Superman takes Lois Lane flying through New York City, or Metropolis, I guess, during the night. He picks her up and he flies her through the sky. I think this has got to be a fantasy for everyone, right? Like, you either want to be Superman and have your Lois Lane and sweep her away, through the clouds, or you want to be Lois Lane and get with Superman and be swept away through the clouds. So this is just a universal fantasy. When I saw it brought to life by Richard Donner and Christopher Reeves and Margot Kidder, I was blown away, even as a kid. And yes, I've watched it recently. And yes, you can kind of see the edges now. I'm willing to suspend that disbelief and just be carried away by this moment. True movie magic in its day.
Matt, you had me at 1978. You had me at 1978. I'm a mess here. I am an absolute mess over here. I'm right with you. I obviously was probably 5-6 years old. I don't even know when I was finally saw Superman. I can't remember, but I saw it at home at some point. And you're right. I mean, I was waiting for the action, but there was something always that was moving about that scene. It's classic cinema to me too. I still rank Superman 1 and 2 as some of my favorite superhero movies because of Christopher Reeves and Lois Lane's, Margot Kidder's interaction. The way they work on screen is awesome.
Absolutely. All right. What do you got sitting there, Ryan? Number one.
My number one, I hate to get all sappy with you here, Matt Kay. This one, actually, I have it at my number one because there's some truth to the movie and that I saw in it, and it goes back to 1984, one of my all-time favorite movies, and especially my favorite movie as a kid. Tried to get me into karate as much as I could. I'm going with The Karate Kid. Daniel LaRusso taking Allie with an eye out onto a date. And again, watch the scene before. It's a very quick scene. It's one of these collages, a quick take of everything that they did really fast with a fun song playing. The scene actually starts. The moment that was so truthful for me was the scene starts when Daniel LaRusso's mom has to actually drive them to the date because Daniel doesn't have a driver's license yet.
Sure. And we've all been there too, right?
Oh, man. And she pulls up in this station wagon his mom was driving. They pull up in front of Allie's house, and her parents are just coming home from like their tennis club, and they got like their sweaters over their shoulders, and the station wagon is pulled in front of this mansion. They say hi, and then Allie gets in the car, and it won't start. Daniel's mom says, "Do you drive stick?" And she says, "Yeah." And Daniel and his mom have to get out in front of her parents and start pushing the car until it starts and still it kicks in. I say the truth there is our family station wagon. I think we've talked about how we've all had station wagons.
Yeah.
My family had the station wagon and held on to it as the family car all the way until I was in high school. And it was like to the point of embarrassment that I didn't want my parents to pick me up with the station wagon anymore. You know, like nobody was driving the station wagon anymore, but my parents still held on to the damn wagon and embarrassed the hell out of me. So I think that always touched some truth. But of course they go to the golf and stuff, and they do this miniature golf. They do go-karts. They play the table hockey. It's Elizabeth Shue looking as cute as she possibly could at the time. The song playing is absolutely perfect. It's a great date. And of course it's ruined by, the Cobra Kai's pulling up and making fun of Daniel's mom's car once again.
But even that couldn't completely rain on his parade. This was just a scene that Daniel wins, right? He doesn't necessarily lose the scene when the Cobra Kai make fun of the car.
No. Yeah, not really. I mean, he's a little down at that moment, but I mean, he just went out on a date with Elizabeth Shue. Yes, he won, Matt Kay. Yes, he won. Honorable mentions here, Matt Kay.
I got a couple. Speaking of Adam Sandler, 50 First Dates. There was something between him and Drew Barrymore. Of course, Wedding Singer really captured that best. But 50 First Dates was at least an unusual concept for a rom-com, and for that reason I kind of liked it. Sean Astin is absolutely hilarious in this movie. One scene that I will never ever forget and that changed comedy, really did, was the prom pickup in Something About Mary. The whole Frank and Beans thing happens in the bathroom, like the whole everything that happens in that scene, all the disasters. Yeah. I'll never forget it. Never forget it.
I have 4, so I'm going to go quick here. I say the scene that probably won Jennifer Lawrence her Oscar came on a date scene in Silver Linings Playbook.
Yes.
When they go to the diner, just a monumental scene.
Yep.
I know you don't like the movie, but the time we actually do fall in love with Jack and Rose in Titanic is when he brings her down into the steerage with the poor folk, and they have this great dance with the Irish music playing. I love that scene. And she does the ballet and is drinking beer with, it's the best. God, I love that scene.
What is wrong with you, Ryan? I mean, you might as well have said Twilight when Edward shows her how he twinkles.
Crazy Stupid Love. This is between Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling. And they have a great date that ends where she's asking him to see The Move when they're back at his place. And eventually he breaks down and tells her the move has to do with incorporating Dirty Dancing. It's just hysterical. If you haven't seen it, one of the better rom-coms in a long time. And my last one is 500 Days of Summer. There is a great scene where they go to IKEA on a date. And they basically are going to the different areas of IKEA and talking about their house together in a kitchen, and they don't like this, and they go to a different kitchen, then they're in a bedroom. It's quite funny.
I'm surprised you didn't have anything from the Before series.
I toyed putting that on there, but it's weird because yes, those are dates, but really the first time is like a chance encounter, and then it's just a whole day together.
Not really a date.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
If we missed your favorite date scenes and you have Twitter pulled up, shoot us a tweet at Cinemajaw and we will retweet it, get the discussion going. What we're going to do is take a quick break. When we come back, we have another review. This one starring Elijah Wood, entitled Come to Daddy, plus a game of Stump the Kubinski. Stick with us.
but you guys have probably heard about this other villain who stole the pyramids. Apparently, it's a big deal. People are calling it the crime of the century and stuff like that. But, am I upset? No, I am not. A little, but we have had a pretty good year ourselves. And you guys are all right in my book. No raises. You're not going to get any raises. What did we do? Well, we stole the Times Square Jumbotron! Nice! That's how I roll! Yeah, you all like watching football and that, huh? But that's not all. We stole the Statue of Liberty! The small one from Las Vegas. And I won't even mention the Eiffel Tower! Also Vegas. Okay, I wasn't going to tell you about this yet, but I have been working on something very big. Something that will blow this pyramid thing out of the water. And thanks to the efforts of my good friend, Dr. Nefario.
Thank you.
Oh, there he is. He's styling. Now, we have located the shrink ray in a secret lab. And once we take this shrink ray, we will have the capability to pull off the true crime of the century. We are going to steal. Wait! I haven't told you what it is yet. Hey, Dave, listen up, please. Next, we are going to steal... Pause for effect.
And we are back on Cinemajaw. Matt, before we get to our review of Come to Daddy and before we play Stump the Kubinski, we did throw a couple items into the jaw box. So let's open up that jaw box.
What's your pleasure, Mr. Cotton?
The box.
We got a box! What's in the box?
The first one was, when did we do date movies? You took a stab at it and you were right. You actually said you thought it was episode 84 and you are correct.
Wow.
84th episode of Cinemajaw. That seems like a lifetime ago.
Does seem like a lifetime ago. And talk about a useless talent. Cinemajaw trivia knowledge. Like, wow. I can't believe I nailed that. That's crazy.
The other one I threw in was about the cable guy, since I have not seen it. I wanted to see if it was streaming anywhere. What I found on the site, I don't know if you guys use this site. I use Real Good, and it's one of these sites that you can type in a movie and it'll tell you any streaming service that it's on. And they update all the time. So,
I have to check that one out. I usually use isitstreaming.com.
Oh, okay. So I threw it into there and it produced for free anyways. You can rent it multiple places, but for free it's streaming on Crackle. Before we close this jaw box, Matt, we got some feedback on Steve Carell.
Yeah, we did want to finish out our Steve Carell month asking all the Jawheads what their favorite performance was. We've been asking every week this month. And this one comes from Don Shanahan from Every Movie Has a Lesson, good friend of the show. And he wrote in to say, I'm a big fan of Steve Carell's performance in Beautiful Boy. Unlike a few of his peers who have transitioned from TV to film, Steve's been making smart and challenging choices with roles for the better part of a decade to show that he's more than just Michael Scott. I find his portrayal of a father reeling with the drug addiction challenges of his son to be a dramatic peak for the usual funny man. Carell maximizes his sorrowful eyes and morose posture to exude frustration and grief. Sure, he's done flashier things, but I found that Steve's dedicated presence in scenes and in the material to be very compelling and powerful. I've never been more impressed with him. Don Shanahan.
Thank you, Don. This was a movie I was a little disappointed with.
Really?
And it had Timothée Chalamet in it.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying it's absolutely awful. It was definitely sort of Oscar bait and going for a award season, and it sort of missed its mark there. It's just a little off. I'm not saying it's a bad movie. I think I expected more because I had already seen Timothy Chalamet in Call Me By Your Name, and we know that Steve Carell can be great, and the subject matter looked very powerful.
True story, right?
And true story, and I thought, wow, this is really going to be something. Maybe my expectations were just so extremely high that this came up a little bit short for me, but I do recommend checking it out if you haven't.
You know what I realized? Don is an incredible writer, by the way. Like, I went to his website recently and was just reading some of his stuff. He's a bit of a wordsmith, man. Have you actually like sat down and read through some of his reviews?
It's been a while, but yeah, I have.
This is my compliment to you, Don. Very good writing. I like it a lot.
Awesome. Let's close this job box. Let's get to Come to Daddy. Looking for a laugh? More specifically, looking for a laugh from a bizarre film? Look no further than Come to Daddy. Besides being funny and a little creepy, it also answers the question, what would Elijah Wood look like with a bowl haircut? His latest film is out on VOD, so Matt and I grabbed a seat on the sofa to check it out.
Yeah. It's me. Norm. I got your letter?
I never thought I'd see you again. How long's it been?
A long time.
A long time, yeah.
I realize I know nothing about you.
Boy, your mom really doesn't talk about me, does she?
Oh, really?
Elijah Wood plays Norval, a young man who still lives with his mother. He receives a letter from his estranged father asking him to come visit him in Oregon. Norval has not seen his father since he left him and his mother when he was just 5 years old. So upon arriving to his cabin, where his father is staying, the relationship is a bit rocky, to say the least. Is it just the time spent apart, or is there something more here? The film's tone is dark and bizarrely funny. In fact, I loved Elijah Wood in this. Matt, this seems like your kind of film. Am I right?
You are wrong. Come to Daddy tries and fails to be my kind of film. The first act, I was hooked. I was hooked by it pretty well, Ryan. Norval follows this bizarre treasure map through the woods to a beautiful cabin by the sea and is greeted by his father. The first few nights, we see his father sink more and more into an alcohol-fueled rancor that Norval tries to solve. That's when things got interesting, and then it all falls apart. Norval meets a coroner, hears ghostly scrapings in the night, finds a secret compartment or two in the house, discovers some secrets about his father, and wrestles with his own demons. These setups more or less had me, but then Jethro comes into the movie, and it's all pretty much downhill from there. The third act of Come to Daddy devolves into something that attempts to be funny through its brutality, but it just frays at its own edges. The characters behind some of the mystery are unsatisfying, poorly written, and even more poorly acted. I will nod at one very funny sequence involving Norval's dad, a dislocated thumb, and a chain. But it's a slight nod, Rye. Too many go-nowhere characters are introduced in the final act. A bodybuilding prostitute, a kind coroner, a poop-slinging criminal, a perverted motel clerk, and even Russian swingers. If that all sounds like a riot, get ready, because it's not. None of these players are given anything close to a character arc and just show up for laughs, I guess. Boo. Where this film ends up is a bloody mess that had me scratching my head. I think Come to Daddy thought it had something to say, but I honestly have no idea what that was. Plus that title. Rye, we need to talk about that title.
Come to Daddy. You don't like it, huh?
No, my wife was like, hey, what movie are you watching tonight? And I'm like, Come to Daddy. She's like, what did you say?
Well, I think the tone the movie was going for is the tone of that title, right? I mean, there's this like sort of dark pun sexual innuendo going on with the title. And that tone of the title is what hopefully they thought the movie was going for. And I think for the most part, it got it right as far as the tone goes. I just don't think did it anything differently or better than a movie. I mean, there's been other like dark, twisted comedies like this that do it much better than Come to Daddy. So it sort of fell short for me also.
Yeah, I mean, here's one thing in particular. I do want to dance around it because the third act is surprising, at least how it opens up. And maybe some people have a different opinion than I do on this, so I don't want to spoil anything. But we do meet a character who is described as a hunchback. When you say somebody is a hunchback, and this is emphasized at least 2 or 3 times, this character is a hunchback. He's a hunchback. When we finally meet this person, it's not a hunchback. He's just kind of like a heavy set dude. He's not really a hunchback at all. And he's also kind of described as a heavy, and I didn't find him all that threatening, to be honest with you.
Okay, so there's also a couple of like really brutal killings, some bloody scenes, gory. And these scenes are actually supposed to be played for laughs. And I did laugh out loud at exactly, it just got a little bit like if you go to the Quentin Tarantino end of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where it was this heightened violent scene that almost got you to start giggling at the violence. There were a couple of those. They were going for it. I don't think it quite hit that level of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but I did laugh along with the violence at a couple of the scenes. I thought those were pretty funny.
Like I said, the bit with the chain and the dislocated thumb, I laughed at that. And then there's the attack in the kitchen, which was incredibly brutal and it's going to make you squirm a little bit. But yeah, it was also kind of funny. There's a confrontation toward the end of the film that involves one of those little spikes you put receipts on in a cheap motel. That one sort of lost me. I don't know. And then do you agree with me here about like all these interesting characters, or to a lesser and greater degree, that are just like go nowhere characters? Like the prostitute, I thought that she was going to be something more. Even the Russian swingers that are introduced, like all these characters come in and then just evaporate. The coroner, for example.
Yeah, it was more about meeting these strange characters than it was actually getting to know these strange characters. And I will say that the third act is, if people like the third act, obviously they're going to really like this movie. And then I think there's going to be some people that feel that it fell a little short of their expectations. That's where I would fit in. But I do think the first half or even 2/3 of the movie, for me, I mean, it was enjoyable enough.
Yeah. I mean, he's seeing people out in the woods. He's hearing things in the house at night.
And the relationship between him and his father, like you don't know exactly what's going on there. I like that tension, that sort of scary tension that is building between the two. I enjoyed the hell out of that.
Yeah, and then even when that tension gets released, the scenes that come after that, I found incredibly enjoyable. Where it really comes off the rails is, like I said in my review, when Jethro comes in, because he's a character that should have been pivotal and just isn't. It falls flat on its face from that point out.
You got a movie poster quote for me, Matt?
I do. Elijah Wood's mustache is the best part of this movie.
Well, I focused on Elijah Wood with my movie poster quote as well, and I simply said, we need more of this kind of Elijah Wood.
I don't know, man. I mean, like, I think of a Sin City where he plays Kevin, right? Was that the character's name? Anyway, his character in Sin City with the glasses, and how creepy he is with those eyes, you know, like they make something of his eyes in this movie. And it was kind of funny, I guess, but I mean, also
the mustache, the haircut, everything worked for Elijah Wood. I was like laughing at just the look of Elijah Wood. So that, from that standpoint,
Elton John scene was pretty good.
How many jaws, Matt K?
I give this 1.5 jaws.
Ooh, wow. You are tough. Why don't I whip out the quarter jaw and say 2.25 jaw? 2.25.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I'm shocked that you liked this movie. I really am. It doesn't go anywhere.
I'm not going bonkers over it, but it's a good dark comedy.
You like the ending? You were satisfied where the whole thing winds up?
No, I would say a little disappointed, but enough. The movie was enough for me to say, yeah, I would slightly recommend this to people.
Okay.
Jawheads, it's out on video on demand. Maybe you've seen it already. If you have, write us feedback at cinemajaw.com. Me and Matt somewhat split on that one. And that brings us to Stump the Kubinski. 3 questions, Matt K. He gets a chance to answer one of these 3 and flip the script, and we play Stump the movie guy.
I'm ready. Yeah, dude. I'm so tired of doing Stump the Kubinski. It's your turn to be on the hot seat, so let's do it. I brought my thinking hat.
I made these all extremely easy.
Oh, don't patronize me.
You think I'd do that?
No, I don't. They're probably like...
These are the hardest questions I've ever written.
Yeah, some obscure French director made 16 movies. Name all 16 of them in order.
All right, here we go. Talking about, you're right. First question, obscure filmmaker, you probably never heard of him. The great Stanley Kubrick only directed 4 movies from 1975 until his death in 1999. 4 movies. Name 3 of those films. 3. Stanley Kubrick, between 1975 and 1999, made 4 movies. I'm asking Matt K to name 3 of them.
Eyes Wide Shut.
That's 1.
The Shining.
That's 2. Oh my God, I'm nervous.
2001: A Space Odyssey.
That is incorrect.
Is that not Kubrick?
That is, but it's way before 1975.
It is? Holy crap. Yeah. Really?
Yeah, that's in the 60s. Wow. The other 2 were Barry Lyndon, which is a very difficult one, not as well known. But the one that I thought you would get was Full Metal Jacket.
I totally would have gotten Full Metal Jacket, but I didn't think that I needed to because I was damn sure that Space Odyssey came out in the 70s. Damn it.
All right. We are still stumping the Kubinski here. On to question 2. It is Steve Carell month, so we should have a Steve Carell question. So I went with this one. Steve Carell has made 2 movies with Ryan Gosling. Name them both.
Really? Jesus. I don't even know if I can name one of them.
Imagine that pairing. Was Steve Carell and Ryan Gosling.
Was Steve Carell in Drive? Was Ryan Gosling in 40-Year-Old Virgin? Wait a second. Is one of them animated?
No.
Oh, okay.
These are live action. Live action.
He didn't voice a character in the Despicable Me series. Oh, crap, dude. I honestly can't even think of one of them with those 2 together.
Ryan Gosling, Steve Carell.
The Place Beyond the Pines and The Nice Guys.
That is incorrect on both fronts, of course. We were looking for one movie that was mentioned by me earlier in the show, Crazy Stupid Love.
Never saw it. It's a blind spot.
Yep. And the other one was one of your movies that you bring up quite a bit on the show. You're a big fan of it, The Big Short.
Oh, damn it. I didn't think of that one. Okay. All right. Fair enough. You got to just make this name one of them, man. I mean, I got 2 of those Kubrick ones.
All right. Here we go. Last question of Stump the Kubinski. This is exciting stuff. A popular mistake made by many is that Steven Spielberg directed The Goonies. He did not. He only produced the film. Matt K., who directed The Goonies?
Don't do this to me.
Oh, man. The torture.
Here's the thing, Jawheads. I love The Goonies. I wear a Goonies. I actually own 2 or 3 different Goonies t-shirts. I've had The Goonies on every format that has ever come out that you can watch a movie on, including Laserdisc at one point. I love this movie, but I don't know that answer right off the top of my head. I should. I absolutely should.
I wrote this question especially for Matt K.
Yeah, because I should know this. I should. It's not like somebody equally famous as Spielberg. Like it's not like a Zemeckis or something like that. Is that fair? Can I at least?
Fair.
Okay, all right. Fair. Has this guy directed other stuff that I would know?
Yes. In fact, a movie was mentioned on the show that he directed. That's your hint.
Oh, man. Brian De Palma.
Oh, that would have been great.
Brian De Palma's The Goonies.
That is incorrect. So we did stump the Kubinski, but you're really going to kick yourself because you actually mentioned him earlier in the show, and I was stunned. I was like, oh my God. I thought Matt knows this one when you mentioned his name. Believe it or not, it was Richard Donner.
Really?
Superman. Yes, Richard Donner, who did Superman, also directed The Goonies.
Wow. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, but I guess because, like you said, everybody just assumes it's a Spielberg joint. It feels like a Spielberg joint. I mean, when J.J. Abrams made Super 8, he wasn't thinking about Richard Donner. He was thinking about Spielberg, you know?
Yeah. No, it definitely feels like that classic 80s Spielberg, vibe. But no, Richard Donner, who, yes, directed the Superman movies, and yes, well, I have not seen it yet, but he has his own cut of Superman 2 called the Donner Cut.
Right. And so what you're saying is there's also a Donner cut of the Goonies.
Yeah, and you probably own it on every format.
No, I don't, but I'm gonna search it. I'm gonna hunt it down. Holy crap. Donner cut of the Goonies. I'm in.
Wow. So we have successfully stumped the Kubinski once again. So we continue on, Meke.
Hey, all right. We got to put a limit on at least, like, let's say 2. You got to name 2 of them. Whatever the question is, if you say, like, this actor made, 4 movies with this other actor, name 2. That's going to be the cap.
Wow. All right. We're capping that. Jawheads, before we sign out for the week, we do have our movie next week picked out. It's a Netflix movie entitled Lovebirds. So check it out. If you see it and you got a comment, shoot us an email, feedback@cinemajaw.com. That's about it for this week, Matt. This has been a blast. Yeah, this was a fun one, man. Like you were saying when we were off the air, it sometimes it's fun, a little less pressure to just do it, the 2 of us. You know what? It was kind of like a date, Ryan. I agree. Now we're at that awkward point of the date where is somebody getting a kiss here, or are we just going home? Jesus. You went and made it weird. Yeah, absolutely. Matt, we got to thank our sponsors. Yes, thanks to Overcast and the Chicago Podcast Co-op, who help us get great sponsors like them. If you want to support Cinemajaw, the easiest way to do so is by leaving us a review wherever you're listening to this podcast. While you're doing that, click subscribe, and if you're looking for another way to support us, we are on Patreon, so you can join us there, patreon.com/Cinemajaw. Until next week, I'm Ryan, the movie guy. I'm Matt K, and keep on jawing about the movies.